I really need a workbench that I can do fabrication work on in my garage, except there's one problem. I'm really lazy. So in this episode, I'm going to try to build the most bare bones workbench in as little time as possible. Whoa. But I do have another problem as well. I don't actually know what I'm even doing. Alright, today is going to be the first episode in which I work on this garage. I do not have any sort of workbench, nor have I ever had one in the past. And I have a little tiny space right here in my garage. So I'm going to be making a little bit of a custom workbench out of just plywood and 2x4s so that it works here, and mount my new vise on. So I'm going to go get started on that now. So first thing I wanted to do was see exactly how much space I'm working with. And I measured about a 47 inch by like 24 inch spot. And so I got several 2x4s to cut down for the legs and support the tabletop, as well as a piece of plywood that was already pre-cut to 24 by 48. But they didn't exactly fit in my car well, so I'm glad I brought the circular saw. So I basically just had to cut off about a foot of all the 2x4s to get them to fit way better in the car. So at this point, you may be asking yourself, hey Abi, what is this table gonna look like? And I don't actually know yet. I'm just playing this by ear, and so once I had got all the materials, I realized I need to come up with a design quick, because I didn't really plan this far out. So I decided to first get started on the tabletop, to take it piece by piece and not get too overwhelmed. And I found that this 48 inch wide pre-cut plywood actually fit beautifully in the spot. So I decided to just go with the 48 inch wide table. And then what I wanted to do was measure 3 inches in from the outside. That way, when I put some 2x4s beneath the plywood to support it, it won't get in the way of me clamping stuff to the edge of the table. So once that was measured out, I wanted to figure out where I could put the vise so that the bolts to hold it don't go into the 2x4s, they actually have a spot to bolt into. And then another thing I had to think through was making sure that the medium that it's holding won't ever actually run into the tabletop itself. So basically, so that that closer jaw is past the edge of the table. So once I had figured out the placement of all of that, I got started on cutting the 2x4s. So my plan here is to basically support that plywood tabletop with this like 2x4 frame, while also making sure that it's 3 inches in from the edge on the front, left, and right, since I'm never really going to be clamping anything to the back. And I don't want the legs to be too narrow in their spacing so that it's too like wobbly. And so with the last piece cut, this is the frame that I'm going to be going with to basically fully support this tabletop. So once I found some screws that were long enough to go through both pieces of material, I got started basically pre-drilling all of these holes so that I wouldn't crack anything, and then basically just screwing them together. It's pretty easy stuff. The hardest part here was making sure that nothing moved because I didn't have a clamp that was 2 foot long to hold the whole frame together. So I was basically just putting my weight on the 2x4 to just hold in place as much as I could while I was pre-drilling and drilling in the screws. And at this point, I'm genuinely kind of surprised that this is working. I've never really done anything like this, and honestly, I'm just playing it by ear. So with that frame finished, the last thing I had to do was actually just drill it to the plywood tabletop. But the kind of janky part here is I don't have a really perfect way to know where to drill. So I did my best to just guesstimate where those frame lines were by looking at it from the side and just drilled right in between. And honestly, I just got lucky that they all lined up. You know, for something that I'm hacking together in literally like an hour, this is not too shabby looking. And with the tabletop complete, it was time to start thinking about the legs, which is something I had not really thought about as well. So I measured out a couple of heights to see what would feel a bit natural, and also did a bit of research on what a good workbench height is. And then started just cutting some legs together. I'm not exactly sure how these are going to mount up or anything, but that's a problem I'm going to solve when I get to that. For now, I'm just focused on cutting 4 pieces of 2x4 to be the same length, which they weren't exactly. So I had the idea to just clamp them all together and then make one final pass to just trim them all to the exact same length, which felt like a really good idea at the time. But I kind of forgot one little detail. And you can see that here. I forgot that I was cutting the 2x4 sideways, and the blade cutting depth does not reach that full length. So I kind of just cut a groove into these legs. So what do you do in that situation? Well, I can tell you it's definitely not what I'm doing here, which is turn it around and try and match that line. Because I only made my problem worse. I was basically accidentally removing height from these legs and just completely screwing it up. And you can see the 2 cuts, they were off. So then I had the idea to just get a handsaw and cleanly fix it with that, which is what I should have done in the first place. And ta-da! I had 4 legs that were exactly the same length. So next up, I gotta figure out how I'm actually gonna attach it to the tabletop.
So the problem now is I made each leg to be one stud, and but this is the wheel I'm planning to attach to it. I haven't really thought through how I'll have enough surface area to put a whole wheel on it. Like, I'm not sure how, this being the end of the leg, how this is gonna fit on it. Yeah, gotta figure that out. Could do something stupid, like just put this on the base and just screw it in. Basically, build it like that. This is so janky. And then I would do this. Interesting. I think I'm just gonna do this because I don't care enough. But yeah, here's the proof of concept. Kind of jank.
Okay, so with that, I got the bottom half of the legs figured out, but I still need to figure out how the top of the legs was going to attach to the tabletop.
So the fact that I'm making this so jank and kind of by hand means that none of the angles are true 90-degree angles. For example, I was trying to align this leg up here, but if I try and align it to this surface, it actually goes askew because you can kind of tell this is askew. So then the leg, it's hard to tell, but it's going askew like that. And they're not going to line up at the bottom. So this is only getting more jank. I'm using a box as a 90-degree. Oh my god, this is going downhill so fast. But I kind of don't care.
So since I'm kind of just building this by ear and improvising as I'm going, there's a lot of little details that are starting to stick out that I'm just kind of drilling my way through. I'm normally a pretty hardcore perfectionist, so it was pretty tough for me to watch one of my builds come together so janky, but I was kind of using this as an exercise to push myself to just be a bit more efficient, since this doesn't really need to be perfect. So with the legs attached, I realized that it was going to be a little wobbly. They were pretty long and they were just held to the tabletop with a few screws, so I definitely needed some sort of additional bracing on these legs.
Alright, this is where we're at now.
So I've realized that with this bracing to keep the legs from wobbling too much, this would give me that really wide surface I need to mount the casters. So this was working out pretty well.
Alright, wheel time. Alright, we're almost done here. I solved my wheel issue by just putting a flat piece of 2x4, and then I can screw wherever I want onto them. And I can put it upright and at least it can sit here, which is kind of impressive that I've been able to pull this off in like an hour and a half with no experience. But then I just got to put the vise in, which I don't know if I have a drill bit big enough, so I'll figure that out later. But at least the table will sit. I'm feeling pretty good.
So the final step of getting this table at least upright and functional is to get these casters on. And the reason I want to put some casters on is because I'll probably be using this table for some metalworking as well. And I definitely cannot have sparks flying in my garage. So I'll be needing to pull it out to the driveway once in a while to work on it there. So this will give me that flexibility.
Pretty much done. So let's see how wonky it is. I did not trust that I did this accurately.
So because I kind of improvised as I went and not all the angles were perfect 90, I was worried that this might not be that stable when it's fully upright. But I was actually pretty surprised.
Whoa. Alright, that's a thing. Alright. It's quite tall. I think I can work with it. I made it a little taller than probably average because I'm a little tall and I don't want to lean over so much. But wow. For like an hour and a half of labor, I actually feel pretty good for what I accomplished. Wow.
That probably gives you a pretty good idea of how low my expectations were going into this. But I was surprised that this wasn't actually a piece of junk and was quite dang functional, which is exactly what I needed.
Wow. Oh, this is nice to actually have a table for once.
And so now on to the final step, which is mounting the bench vise on the tabletop. The only issue is that the bench vise uses a 5/8 inch bolt to go through the desktop, but my biggest drill bit is just 1/2 inch. So my plan of attack here is just go ahead with the 1/2 inch and just move it around a lot. And just try and just get the hole big enough, I guess.
This really moves the table. Okay, look how it's wobbling the table. We'll fix that in the future. For now, I know the holes are lining up, so I guess keep drilling until I just make it bigger.
And oh boy, did I drill. So on this hole in particular, I felt like I was almost there, but it was becoming really difficult to drill. So I took the brute force approach.
You know what? I'll take it.
And ta-da! The desk was done. So now the only thing I have left to do is try it out. So the desk is definitely a little bit janky, but overall, I'm really happy with it. And this is just the beginning of my garage build. I'm going to be doing so much more in the future, including custom wiring a lot of LEDs, possibly painting it, and building in a lot more storage. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.